She had been working at the small restaurant for what felt like forever. Every morning, she woke up before the sun, pulling herself out of bed with a sense of determination that came not from joy, but from necessity. She knew she had responsibilities, bills to pay, and dreams that could not survive without money in her pocket. As she tied her apron around her waist, she looked in the mirror and forced herself to smile. The reflection staring back at her was tired, but there was also a spark, faint but persistent, that refused to die. It was a spark of hope, the kind that kept her moving forward even when life seemed to push her down. The restaurant was always busy. The clatter of plates, the hum of conversation, and the occasional laughter filled the air. She moved between the tables with a kind of practiced grace that only came from repetition. She remembered the first day she had walked into this place, nervous and unsure. The owner had given her a quick tour and a few instructions before throwing her into the deep end. At first, she had stumbled over words, mixed up orders, and spilled drinks. But over time, she learned. She learned to read the room, to notice the subtle signs of impatience or satisfaction on a customer's face. She learned to navigate the small chaos that surrounded her every day. Her coworkers were a mixed bunch. Some were friendly and supportive, while others were indifferent or even slightly rude. She learned to keep her head down and focus on her work. It was easier that way. Complaints from customers were part of the job, and she had learned to take them in stride. When a dish arrived cold, when someone complained about a long wait, or when a customer left without saying thank you, she simply nodded and apologized, reminding herself that it was never personal. She knew her job was to serve. She accepted that with quiet determination. But beneath the surface of her everyday routine, there was another world. A world that existed only in her mind. A world where she was free to express herself without fear or judgment. This world was her music, her singing. She had loved it since she could remember. As a child, she would sing to herself while doing chores, her voice carrying through the empty rooms of her home. It had been her escape, her refuge from the difficulties of life. She remembered the small school talent shows, the times she had performed in front of classmates, and the thrill of seeing people react to her voice. Back then, it had felt magical, like she was touching something bigger than herself. Life, however, had a way of pulling her back down. Money problems, family responsibilities, and the harsh realities of adulthood had pushed her dreams aside. Singing became something she did in secret, late at night, after a long day of work. In the small apartment she shared with her roommate, she would close the door, take a deep breath, and let her voice fill the room. Sometimes, she would sit at the window, singing softly while the city lights twinkled outside. It was her moment of freedom, a brief escape from the routine that dominated her life. She had learned to live with this duality. By day, she was the polite server, moving efficiently between tables, taking orders, and serving meals. By night, she was a singer, a dreamer, someone who could lose herself in the music and forget the struggles of the world. It was not an easy balance, and it often left her exhausted. But she could not give it up. It was a part of who she was, the part that reminded her she was more than her job. More than the person others saw on the surface. Her interactions with customers were often routine, but occasionally there were moments that reminded her of the joy in connecting with people. A smile of appreciation, a word of kindness, a tip left with a note that said thank you. These small gestures mattered. They made her feel seen, if only for a brief moment. And sometimes, she would catch glimpses of other people's lives, stories unfolding at their tables. She watched families laughing together, couples sharing quiet moments, friends celebrating milestones. These glimpses reminded her that life was bigger than her struggles. Joy existed even in small doses. There were days when the exhaustion weighed heavily on her. Long hours on her feet, carrying trays filled with food, navigating the crowded restaurant, and managing the emotions of customers. It was draining. She often went home with sore feet, aching muscles, and a mind full of worries. Yet she never complained. She knew she had chosen this path, and she accepted the challenges that came with it. Her determination was quiet but unwavering, a steady force that carried her through the toughest days. Despite the challenges, she found moments of humor and lightness in her work. She would exchange playful banter with coworkers during brief breaks, share jokes with regular customers, and find small ways to make her day more enjoyable. These moments did not erase the difficulties, but they provided relief. A reminder that life could still hold laughter, even in hard times. Her family had always supported her dreams, but circumstances had made it impossible to pursue them fully. She remembered her parents' words of encouragement, their belief in her talent, and the sacrifices they had made to give her a chance. Their faith in her fueled her determination, reminding her that she was not alone. Even when the world seemed indifferent, she carried their belief with her. A quiet strength that kept her moving forward. There was a particular customer she remembered vividly. An elderly man who came to the restaurant every week. He would sit at the same table, order the same meal, and strike up conversations with her whenever she served him. He had a kind face, lined with age and experience, and he seemed genuinely interested in her life. One day he asked her about her dreams, and she hesitated, unsure if she should share them. But something in his gentle eyes encouraged her, and she spoke softly about her love for singing. He listened attentively, nodded, and said, "Keep going. Don't let anything stop you." His words stayed with her, a reminder that even small connections could have a profound impact. She often thought about what her life could be. If she had more opportunities, if she could focus on her passion without the constant burden of survival. These thoughts were bittersweet, filled with both longing and determination. She knew the path would not be easy, but the spark inside her refused to die. It whispered to her every day, urging her to keep going, to keep dreaming, and to believe that something extraordinary could happen. The restaurant itself was a character in her story. Its worn wooden floors, the smell of fresh bread and coffee, the hum of conversation, it was familiar and comforting. Yet it also reminded her of the life she had not yet achieved. She knew every corner, every table, every nuance of the place. It was a world she had mastered, and yet it was not the world she truly belonged to. Her heart longed for something more, something that could showcase the talent she had nurtured in secret. There were nights when she lay awake, thinking about the future. She imagined herself on a stage, performing for an audience that hung on her every note. She pictured the lights, the applause, the feeling of being seen and appreciated for who she truly was. These dreams were vivid and intoxicating, providing solace and motivation. They reminded her that her life was not limited to the walls of the restaurant, that her potential extended far beyond the tasks she performed each day. Even in the midst of routine and exhaustion, she found small moments of beauty. A sunset outside the window, the laughter of children passing by, the kindness of a stranger. These glimpses of life's wonders reminded her of what she was working for. They gave her the strength to continue, to endure the long hours, and to keep her dreams alive, as days turned into weeks and weeks into months. She continued her routine with quiet resilience. She served tables, smiled through the fatigue, and navigated the challenges with grace. Yet beneath it all, the spark of her dreams burned steadily, a constant reminder that something extraordinary awaited her. She carried this spark with her through every interaction, every shift, and every night spent singing in the solitude of her apartment. Her story was one of perseverance, of balancing the demands of life with the pursuit of passion. It was a story of quiet strength, of holding on to hope even when the world seemed indifferent. And though she had not yet stepped into the spotlight, the foundation was being laid, the moments of preparation and patience building towards something remarkable. The world outside the restaurant doors awaited, and she knew, deep down, that her time to shine would come. Until then, she moved forward with determination, carrying her dreams with her, waiting for the moment when her hidden talent would finally be seen and celebrated. Even though she spent most of her day serving others, her mind was always somewhere else. The restaurant was her world during the hours she was there, but it wasn't the only world she lived in. Behind the polite smiles and careful service, there was a side of her that only existed in private, part that the busy life around her could never touch. She had always loved music, and it had been a love that grew quietly alongside her responsibilities. As a child, she remembered standing in the corner of her small bedroom singing to herself while the rest of the world slept. It was a private ritual, one that made her heart feel lighter and her mind sharper. Even when life became harder, she never stopped singing, even if only in secret. After long shifts at the restaurant, she would return to her small apartment with aching feet and tired arms. She could feel the weight of the day in every muscle, but as soon as she closed the door behind her, something shifted. The stress and noise faded, leaving room for her real self to emerge. She would put on soft music, sometimes just the sound of a piano, and let her voice fill the empty rooms. It was her time to breathe, her chance to be more than just a server who moved from table to table. In these moments, she could imagine herself on a stage, under bright lights, with a crowd waiting to hear every note she sang. It was a dream that seemed far away, but never impossible. She often thought about the contrast between the person she was at work and the person at the restaurant. She followed routines, memorized menus, and maintained an image of efficiency and composure. She rarely let her true emotions show, and even less frequently did anyone see her as a person with a dream. But in the quiet of her apartment, she allowed herself to be fully human. She could laugh, cry, and express herself without holding back. These private performances were her escape, her reminder that life could hold beauty. Even in its hardest moments, her love for music was not just about escape, it was about connection. Even when she was alone, she imagined the people who might hear her one day, the way her voice could touch someone else's heart. She believed that music had the power to speak what words could not, to reach deep into someone's soul and stir emotions they might not even know were there. It was a belief that kept her going when the world seemed indifferent, a quiet conviction that her talent had meaning beyond the walls of her apartment. Money had always been a concern. She had bills to pay, a modest rent to cover, and daily expenses that never seemed to shrink no matter how hard she worked. Sometimes the financial strain felt crushing, and she wondered if she would ever have the freedom to fully pursue her passion. But she had learned to adapt, to find small ways to keep her dream alive despite the practical challenges. She bought inexpensive notebooks to write down lyrics and melodies, practiced with a borrowed keyboard, and recorded her voice on her phone. These small acts of dedication were not glamorous, but they were important. They were proof that her dream was alive, even if it had to be hidden. There were moments when doubt crept in. She questioned whether she was good enough, or whether anyone would ever truly appreciate her talent, and whether the sacrifices she made for survival were worth the dream she chased. But every time doubt appeared, she reminded herself of the joy singing brought her. She remembered the childhood moments when she had felt pure happiness while singing, the rare times when someone had complimented her voice, and the fleeting thrill of performing in front of a small audience. These memories were a lifeline, a way to remind herself that her passion was not a mistake or a frivolity, but a part of who she was. She often reflected on the idea of opportunity. She knew that opportunities did not always come knocking, and when they did, they often required courage and timing. She longed for a chance to perform publicly, to share her music with people who would listen and understand. The thought made her heart race, imagining a stage, an audience, and the applause that might follow. It was both terrifying and exhilarating. She had never performed in front of many people at once, and the fear of judgment was real. But the desire to express herself outweighed the fear. It kept her motivated. Friends and coworkers occasionally noticed her quiet passion. Some were curious, others supportive, and a few were indifferent. They had seen her humming along to the radio, jotting down notes on scraps of paper, or quietly practicing with her phone. They knew she loved music, but most assumed it was just a hobby, not something that could define her future. She understood this. Few people could see the depth of her dedication, the countless hours she spent refining her skills in secret, and that was fine. Her dream was hers. She didn't need validation to know it mattered. She began to think. It's about ways to bridge the gap between her private world and the outside world. Small steps, she realized, were important. She could start by performing in low-pressure settings, perhaps for friends or local community events. She could record herself and share her music online, slowly building confidence in a small audience. The thought of taking action made her nervous, but it also excited her. She could feel the possibilities, and that energy fueled her determination to continue. Every day, she balanced two lives. In one, she served tables, greeted customers with a polite smile, and navigated the challenges of a busy restaurant. In the other, she sang, dreamed, and nurtured the talent that had been with her since childhood. The contrast was stark, but it also kept her grounded. She learned patience, discipline, and resilience in the restaurant, skills that would serve her well when the time came to pursue her passion publicly. And in her private moments, she nurtured creativity, emotional expression, and the courage to dream. The combination of these experiences was shaping her into someone ready for a breakthrough. There were nights when she felt completely exhausted, the weight of the day pressing down on her. Her body ached, and her mind was foggy, but she would still sit by the window, headphones on, and let the music flow through her. These moments were sacred, and she treated them as such. It was not about perfection or recognition, it was about survival, about keeping the essence of herself alive amid the demands of life. She knew that if she ever let this part of her die, she would lose more than just a hobby. She would lose a piece of her identity. Her family and upbringing had instilled in her a sense of responsibility and determination. She carried these values with her, using them to navigate both work and dreams. They were the quiet strength that allowed her to endure long shifts, difficult customers, and the monotony of everyday life. But they were also the reason she refused to give up on her dream. Responsibility was not just about survival. It was also about honoring the potential she had been given, about making the most of her talents and the opportunities that might arise. She began to notice small moments of inspiration in the world around her. A street musician playing for passers-by, a song on the radio that resonated deeply, or a conversation with someone who believed in pursuing their dreams. All of these fueled her own resolve. She realized that the world was full of stories, struggles, and triumphs, and that her own journey was a part of something larger. This awareness gave her a sense of purpose and a renewed commitment to her music. Even in her moments of doubt, she found ways to stay motivated. She set small goals for herself, like learning a new song, writing a verse, or recording a short clip of her singing. Each small achievement was a step forward, a reminder that progress was possible even when the bigger picture felt daunting. She learned to celebrate these victories, no matter how minor, because they were proof that she was moving toward her dream. Her love for music was more than just a personal passion. It was a lifeline. It gave her meaning, joy, and a sense of identity beyond her daily work. It reminded her that she was capable of greatness, that she could touch people's hearts, and that her voice mattered. Even if no one else saw it yet, she knew it was real, and that knowledge sustained her through the long hours, the exhaustion, and the uncertainty of life. In quiet moments, she imagined the future with vivid clarity. She pictured herself standing on a stage, lights shining, a microphone in hand, and an audience captivated by her voice. She imagined the applause, the smiles, and the feeling of finally being seen for who she truly was. These mental images were not just fantasies, they were goals, guiding her actions and inspiring her to keep moving forward. She knew that one day, the moment would come when her preparation, patience, and dedication would align, and she would have the chance to step into the spotlight. Until that moment arrived, she continued to live her dual life. She served tables with skill and grace, managing the chaos of the restaurant with quiet competence. And when the day ended, she returned to her apartment to nurture her true passion, letting her voice soar in the solitude. Each day brought challenges and exhaustion, but also growth, resilience, and the steady nurturing of a dream that refused to be ignored. She had learned to live with patience, hope, and determination, knowing that every small effort was a step toward the life she had always imagined. Life has a way of surprising people when they least expect it. For her, the surprise came on an ordinary afternoon at the restaurant. She was carrying plates to a busy table when one of the managers approached her with a question that made her stop mid-step. There was a local talent show happening in the city next week, and someone had recommended that she'd consider auditioning. At first, she laughed nervously, thinking it must be a joke. She was just a server, someone who sang in private, someone who had never performed for a large crowd. The idea seemed impossible, but the manager's look was sincere, encouraging, and somehow insistent. She felt a flutter of excitement and fear all at once. This was the chance she had been dreaming about, the opportunity that could change everything, but it also felt terrifying. She spent that evening wrestling with her emotions. Doubt crept in immediately. Could she really do it? What if she failed in front of everyone? What if people laughed or criticized her? These thoughts were loud, relentless, and almost convincing. But alongside them was a quiet, insistent voice inside her, reminding her of years of secret practice, of her love for music, and of every moment she had sacrificed to keep her dream alive. She thought about the joy singing had always brought her and realized that the fear of failing was nothing compared to the regret of never trying. By the end of the night, a decision was made. She would audition. It was a risk, but one she had to take. The following days were a whirlwind. Work continued as usual, with the restaurant's busy hours keeping her on her toes. But now every free moment was consumed with preparation. She practiced relentlessly in the quiet of her apartment, running through songs, perfecting her tone, rehearsing the emotion behind each lyric. Every note, every pause, every inflection mattered. She listened to recordings of herself, critiqued her performance, and adjusted until she felt she could give her best. The process was exhausting, but also exhilarating. The thought that soon her private world could become public kept her motivated. She confided in no one about her plans. Even her closest friends and coworkers assumed she was just busy with the usual routines. The secrecy gave her a strange mix of freedom and pressure. She was accountable only to herself, and the weight of that responsibility was heavy. Every misstep in practice, every doubt, every tiny imperfection felt magnified because the stage was real and the stakes were high. But with each rehearsal, her confidence grew. She began to believe that maybe, just maybe, she was ready. The night of the audition arrived, and with it came nerves unlike anything she had felt before. Her hands shook slightly as she adjusted her outfit, and her stomach was full of butterflies that refused to settle. She repeated her warm-ups over and over, trying to calm her mind, but the anticipation only grew. She looked around at the other participants, all appearing confident and polished, and for a moment, the fear threatened to take over. But then she closed her eyes, took a deep breath, and remembered every night she had spent singing alone, every note that had carried her through hard times, and every moment she had dreamed of this opportunity. She walked onto the stage with a determination that surprised even herself. The room was full of people judges, other contestants, and an audience buzzing with excitement. The lights felt blinding, the air thick with expectation. But as soon as she began to sing, something shifted. The nerves melted away, replaced by focus and passion. Each note she hit was precise, yet full of emotion. Her voice carried through the room, weaving a story that was uniquely hers. The audience leaned in, captivated. The same people who had never noticed her at the restaurant were now completely absorbed. Listening to her every word, her every melody, she felt alive. More alive than she ever had in her entire life. The performance was not just about hitting the right notes, it was about connection. She poured herself into the music, letting every feeling she had bottled up over the years flow freely. The fear, the longing, the hope, and the joy all mixed together, creating a performance that was raw, honest, and unforgettable. The audience responded instinctively, some with wide eyes, others nodding in rhythm, and eventually applause erupted, growing louder and more powerful with each passing second. She stood there, stunned at first, then overwhelmed with emotion as she realized that she had done it. She had shared herself, truly shared herself. People had listened. After the performance, she stepped off the stage, trembling but exhilarated. The judges offered comments filled with praise, highlighting her control, emotion, and unique presence. The other contestants approached her with smiles and admiration, congratulating her on a performance that had clearly moved them. For the first time, she felt seen in a way that went beyond polite recognition or casual compliments. She was not just a server, not just a face in the crowd. She was a performer, a storyteller, someone who could touch hearts with her talent. The days following the audition were a whirlwind of emotions. She replayed the performance over and over in her mind, savoring each moment while also questioning what had just happened. Could this really be the start of something bigger? Was it possible that this one chance could change her life? Slowly, opportunities began to emerge. A local music teacher reached out, offering guidance and mentorship. Small venues contacted her to perform. People from the audition remembered her, praising her talent and encouraging her to continue. The momentum was building, and with it came the realization that her life might never be the same. Even with the excitement, she remained grounded. She continued to work at the restaurant, understanding that financial stability was important and that dreams alone could not pay the bills. But now work felt different. Each tray she carried, each table she served, was a reminder of where she had come from and how far she had traveled. The contrast between the restaurant and the stage was stark, yet it was also a source of strength. She had proven to herself that she could rise above the limitations that life had imposed, and that proof gave her courage. Her friends began to notice changes in her demeanor. There was a new lightness, a confidence that had not been there before. She walked with a sense of purpose, spoke with clarity, and carried herself differently. People were drawn to her energy, curious about the spark that had appeared seemingly overnight. She shared her experiences selectively, savoring the moments of admiration and encouragement without letting them define her. Her focus remained on her growth, on improving her skills, and on preparing for the next performance as she reflected on the experience. She realized that the audition had taught her more than just technical skill or public performance. It had taught her about courage, about taking risks, and about trusting herself. She had faced fear head-on, and in doing so, had discovered a strength she did not know existed. The world could be intimidating, full of judgment and uncertainty. But she had learned that when she embraced her true self, magic could happen. This lesson became the foundation for every decision she made going forward. She also understood that opportunity often arrived unexpectedly. In moments when life seemed ordinary and routine, the chance to audition had come from a casual suggestion, a simple encouragement, yet it had led to a turning point. She realized that paying attention to these moments, being open to risk, and taking decisive action could change the course of her life. It was a lesson in readiness, in being prepared to step forward when the door opened, no matter how small or sudden the chance might seem. Despite the excitement and progress, she remained humble. She knew the journey was far from over. There would be challenges ahead, difficult performances, critical feedback, and moments of doubt. But she had also learned that she could overcome these obstacles, that resilience was as important as talent, and that persistence would ultimately shape her path. Each day became a balance of preparation, practice, and real-life responsibilities. And she approached it with a sense of purpose she had never known before. The experience also deepened her connection to music itself. She began to explore new genres, experiment with different styles, and find ways to express herself more fully. Her passion was no longer just a private indulgence. It had become a driving force in her life. Every note she sang, every song she wrote, every performance she gave was a step toward fulfilling the dream that had been dormant for so long. The fire inside her burned brighter, fueled by the realization that she was capable of achieving more than she had ever imagined. Through it all, she remained grounded in gratitude. She remembered the days spent in the restaurant, the long hours, the unnoticed efforts, and the quiet perseverance that had brought her to this moment. Each step, no matter how small, had contributed to her success. She recognized that her journey was unique, shaped by struggle, determination, and the courage to dream despite the odds. Gratitude became a part of her daily life, a reminder to stay humble and appreciative of both the challenges and the victories. Her story began to inspire others around her. Co-workers, friends, and even strangers admired her bravery and dedication. They saw someone who had worked quietly, nurtured a hidden talent, and seized an opportunity that could have passed unnoticed. Her journey became a symbol of hope, a reminder that even ordinary lives could hold extraordinary moments. The realization that her actions could inspire others added another layer of meaning to her work, performances, and daily life. As she looked toward the future, she felt a renewed sense of possibility. The audition had opened doors, yes, but it had also opened her mind to the idea that she could shape her own destiny. Talent was important, but so were courage, preparation, and perseverance. She had discovered that when she combined these elements, the world responded and opportunities multiplied. Each day became an opportunity to grow, to learn, and to move closer to the life she had always imagined. Even in quiet moments, she reflected on the journey that had brought her here. The day of her first major performance arrived with a mix of excitement and nerves that she had never felt before. The theater was buzzing with energy, full of people who had come to witness talent from across the city. As she waited backstage, she could hear the murmur of the crowd, the occasional laughter, and the subtle tuning of instruments. The sounds that usually made her anxious now made her heart race with anticipation. She knew that this was the moment she had been preparing for all her life. The moment when her secret passion would finally step into the light. She looked at her reflection in the mirror backstage. Seeing a woman ready to embrace her dreams, the person staring back was no longer just a server from a small restaurant. She was a performer, a storyteller, someone about to share a piece of her soul with the world. Her hands trembled slightly, but she held her head high. Deep breaths, she reminded herself, and let the nerves turn into energy. Every rehearsal, every late night practicing alone, every moment of doubt had led her here. She was ready. The announcer called her name, and the backstage area suddenly felt alive with motion. She walked onto the stage, the lights bright and warm on her face, and felt the eyes of the audience turn toward her. For a brief second, she froze, overwhelmed by the sheer presence of so many people. But then she remembered the countless nights singing alone, the songs that had kept her spirit alive, and the fire that had always burned inside her. She lifted the microphone and began to sing. From the first note, the room was silent, save for the sound of her voice. It was clear, rich, and filled with emotion that resonated with everyone in the audience. She sang not just with her vocal talent, but with her heart, letting every feeling, every story, and every dream she had carried for so long pour into the performance. The audience leaned in, captivated by her presence and her ability to connect through music. It was a transformation not just for them, but for her, as she realized she could touch hearts with something she had nurtured quietly for years. As the song progressed, she felt a deep sense of liberation. Every note she sang was a declaration of who she truly was, a rejection of the limitations and expectations that had been placed upon her. The fear that had once gripped her faded into a distant memory, replaced by confidence and joy. She moved across the stage, feeling the rhythm of the music, letting the lyrics flow naturally from her lips. The audience responded instinctively, some tapping their feet, others closing their eyes to savor the moment. All completely immersed in her performance, she reached the climax of the song, a moment that she had practiced countless times alone in her apartment. The notes soared, carrying the depth of her experiences, her struggles, and her triumphs. The room seemed to hold its breath, everyone waiting for the final note. When it came, it was powerful and perfect, leaving a resonant silence that felt like the world itself was listening. And then, as if on cue, the applause erupted. It was thunderous, filling the theater with sound, washing over her like a wave of affirmation. She felt tears prick at her eyes, not from nervousness, but from the overwhelming sense of accomplishment and validation. After the song, she stepped back slightly, bowing to the audience who continued clapping and cheering. The judges nodded with smiles of approval. She could see the admiration in the eyes of other performers who had once seemed so confident. In that moment, she understood that her life had shifted in a way that would change everything. She had moved from being invisible, serving tables and blending into the background, to standing at the center of attention, commanding respect and recognition for her talent. Backstage, her heart still racing. She was greeted by fellow performers and organizers who offered congratulations. Everyone spoke of her voice, her stage presence, and the emotion she had conveyed. She felt a mixture of relief and exhilaration. Relief that she had overcome the fear and nerves that threatened to paralyze her. Exhilaration that she had succeeded beyond what she had imagined. The experience was more than just a performance. It was a turning point, a moment where her dreams became tangible reality. The days that followed were filled with excitement and new opportunities. People remembered her performance and reached out with offers to perform at small events. collaborate on projects, and even participate in local music programs. Her life began to feel larger, richer, and more meaningful. Every interaction, every compliment, every opportunity was a reminder of how far she had come. The restaurant where she worked still remained part of her life, but it was no longer the center. Her passion and her growing career were becoming central. Shaping her decisions and aspirations, her family and friends were amazed by her transformation. They had always known she had talent, but seeing her succeed in such a public and undeniable way was inspiring. They supported her eagerly, attending her small performances, offering encouragement, and celebrating every milestone with her. The shared pride and joy created a network of support that strengthened her resolve and reinforced her confidence. She realized that success was not just about talent, but about having people who believed in her and who celebrated her. Journey, she began to reflect on what had made the performance so impactful. It wasn't just her technical skill or her rehearsed practice. It was the authenticity and emotion she brought to the stage. She had sung from a place of honesty, sharing her experiences, fears, and dreams with everyone listening. That authenticity resonated, creating a connection that transcended words. She understood that true artistry was not about perfection, but about vulnerability and sincerity. And she committed herself to maintain that in every future performance. The experience also deepened her understanding of courage. She had faced immense fear, uncertainty, and self-doubt to stand on that stage. The reward had been beyond what she had imagined, but she knew that courage was not a one-time act. It was a habit, something she needed to cultivate every day. Whether in pursuing new opportunities, learning new skills, or continuing to perform, she realized that embracing fear and taking action despite it was essential to growth. This realization became a guiding principle in her life. Her daily routines began to shift subtly. While she still worked at the restaurant, her perspective had changed. She approached each shift with a sense of balance, recognizing that her job provided stability, but no longer defined her identity. She carried herself with confidence, greeting customers and colleagues with warmth and poise. While privately preparing for the next performance or practice session, the duality of her life was no longer a burden but a source of strength, each aspect feeding into the other to create a well-rounded and resilient individual. She also learned to handle attention and admiration with grace. The applause and recognition she received could have been overwhelming or ego-inflating, but she remained grounded. Remembering the long hours of practice and the quiet nights of preparation that had brought her here, she celebrated her achievements while acknowledging that growth was ongoing, and that every performance offered opportunities to learn and improve. This humility allowed her to remain focused and committed, ensuring that her talent continued to evolve. The impact of her performance extended beyond herself. Friends, co-workers, and even strangers were inspired by her courage and dedication. They saw a person who had worked quietly, nurtured a hidden talent, and seized an opportunity when it arose. Her story became a reminder that perseverance, preparation, and bravery could lead to extraordinary outcomes. People began to approach her for advice, encouragement, and mentorship, and she embraced the chance to share her experiences. Knowing that her journey could help others find their own courage, financial stability became less of a concern as her opportunities multiplied. Small gigs, local performances, and collaborations began to supplement her income, allowing her to reduce her reliance on the restaurant. Each performance provided experience, confidence, and exposure, helping her to build a foundation for a sustainable career. She remained practical, understanding the importance of planning and preparation. But she no longer saw her financial situation as a barrier to pursuing her passion. Her connection to music grew deeper and more personal. She began to experiment with different styles, explore new genres, and write original songs that reflected her journey. Each creation was infused with authenticity, emotion, and the lessons she had learned from life and performance. The act of creating became therapeutic, empowering, and joyful, reinforcing the central role that music played in her life. She discovered that her voice was not just a talent, but a medium for storytelling, connection, and self-expression. Over time, her reputation as a performer grew. People remembered her name, her voice, and the impression she left on stage. Invitations to participate in events, collaborate with other artists, and perform at increasingly prominent venues became more frequent. Her visibility and credibility increased, but she remained committed to her roots, remembering the long hours serving tables and practicing alone. That perspective kept her humble, focused, and motivated. She also cultivated a support network of mentors, fellow performers, and friends who shared her passion for music. These relationships provided guidance, encouragement, and constructive feedback. She learned to value collaboration, mentorship, and community, recognizing that success was not achieved in isolation. The connections she built enriched her life, offering both personal and professional growth, and helping her navigate the challenges that accompanied rising recognition through all these experiences. She remained committed to authenticity. She refused to compromise her voice, her style, or her message for the sake of popularity or commercial success. She understood that her strength lay in the honesty and emotion she brought to her performances. That authenticity not only defined her as an artist, but also inspired those who witnessed her journey. She became a role model for perseverance. Life had changed for her in ways she could never have imagined. After that stunning performance, everything felt different, yet also familiar in the most comforting way. She still walked the streets to the small apartment she had always lived in, still tied her apron around her waist when she worked at the restaurant, but inside, something profound had shifted. She carried herself with a new confidence, a sense of purpose that could not be ignored. Each step was infused with the knowledge that her life was no longer limited to routine. It's no longer confined to the invisible existence of a server unnoticed by most. She had discovered the truth. Her talent had power, and the world had responded to it. Opportunities began to appear as if by magic, though she knew it was anything but magic. It was the result of years of quiet dedication, endless practice, and unshakable determination. Invitations to perform at local events, music schools, and small venues became frequent. Each performance was a chance to grow, to connect, and to refine her skills. She embraced these moments with gratitude and humility, recognizing that each opportunity was a stepping stone on a journey she'd always dreamed of, but had once thought unreachable. She continued to work at the restaurant, not out of necessity alone, but as a grounding force. Serving tables reminded her of the journey she had taken, of the years she had spent honing her craft in secret. It kept her connected to the reality of life, ensuring she did not lose sight of the effort, patience, and resilience that had brought her to this point. Her coworkers noticed the change in her energy, the quiet confidence, and the way she carried herself. Many were inspired, some curious, and others quietly proud of her success. She never boasted. Instead, she let her achievements speak for themselves. Her family and friends were her biggest supporters. They attended her performances, celebrated each milestone, and offered encouragement when she needed it most. Their presence was a reminder that she was never alone, that her journey was shared in love and faith. Each cheer, each word of praise, and each smile added to her sense of purpose, reinforcing her belief that pursuing one's passion could bring fulfillment beyond material rewards. The support system she had always taken for granted now felt more essential than ever. Her life outside work and performances began to expand. She met fellow musicians, composers, and performers who shared her dedication and passion. Collaborations blossomed, creating new avenues for her creativity and expression. Each project brought its own challenges, pushing her to explore different styles, experiment with melodies, and develop her musical identity. The journey was demanding, often requiring late nights, travel, and intense focus, but she welcomed it with open arms. Growth, she understood, came through dedication and courage, and she was ready for it. Even as her public profile grew, she remained deeply connected to the authenticity that had brought her success. She refused to compromise her voice, her style, or the emotional honesty that resonated with audiences. Every song, every performance, every note was an extension of herself, a reflection of the journey she had undertaken. She understood that her talent was not simply a gift, but a responsibility, a chance to inspire, to connect, and to touch lives. This sense of purpose guided her decisions, her creative choices, and the way she interacted with the world.